Hey everyone, and welcome to Holding the Line with Got Your Six Counseling. I'm Peggy, and this is Brittany. This is a space where we get real about the shit nobody wants to talk about: mental health, life, trauma, healing, and everything in between. Sometimes we get clinical, sometimes we get messy, but it's always honest. Quick reminder, this podcast isn't therapy, and it's not a substitute for professional care. We're not here to provide therapy, diagnose, or treat. If you're struggling with mental health, please reach out to a licensed provider. You don't have to go through it alone. We've got your six. We're just two trauma therapists showing up as humans first, ready to have real, unfiltered conversations about the stuff that matters. We're here to break the stigma, share what we've learned from both sides of the therapy room, and talk about the challenges people face every day, especially in the veteran and first responder communities. Whether it's trauma, burnout, relationships, identity, or just getting through the week, we believe that these conversations matter. They deserve space, and that's what we're holding the line for. So let's dive in.
Welcome back, everyone, to Holding the Line with Got Your Six Counseling. I'm Brittany, and this is Peggy, and this is our, third episode? We on three? No, this is four. Fourth,
Who knows at
fourth
this point?
episode behind the yellow line. The first responders. We're talking about 911 dispatchers. If you didn't catch my drift there, today we have my sister finally joining us. She's been a little busy out here saving lives and doing her thing. This is my sister, Kendal Best. She's joining us from her lovely home today. She's going to be talking to us about 911 dispatchers, her job, and how it impacts mental health and all of the things. So Kendal, why don't you, before she introduces herself, let me just tell you. So she's my sister. So if she was anybody else, I'd be like, oh, well, this is how I know her and this is how we met. But we met because I met her when she was a baby. So that's how we met. She's my baby sister. And I was telling Peggy before we started that I'm terrified of her. She keeps us all in line. She stays very busy, so I don't get to see her very often. But we talk on the phone, we text often. I invited her on the show because my family I feel like we're all, I don't say all, but everybody in our family has been a first responder at some point, right? Like dad was a firefighter. He wasn't like a paramedic, was he? Dad was a firefighter, but he was an EMT.
I think he was a cardiac tech
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something
So but he hurt
back
his
then.
back, so then he was a 911 dispatcher for a little bit. Our older sister was a paramedic for a while. Kendall's husband, am I allowed to say this? He's a firefighter too. Is Adam a paramedic?
No, he's an
He's an
intermediate.
intermediate. They don't identify. You can't like train to do that anymore, can you? So they kind of did away with that. Yeah,
No. Yeah, they took the intermediate
yeah.
away.
So he is an intermediate, and yes, our older sister was a paramedic for a while. So I come from a long line of first responders, and I kind of dabbled in the first responder world for a while. And then I was like, this is not for me. And then
I did middle child things.
yeah, it's a middle child thing. So like everyone else was doing it, and I was like, I'm gonna try. I took the class, but I never actually tested. And then I rode on an ambulance for a while. It was just kind of fun, like a volunteer situation. But everyone else kind of did the thing. So then Kendall did the EMT thing for a hot minute. You were an intermediate too, right? No, just EMT.
No,
EMT
just the
basic.
EMT, just a basic.
So for the people that
Yeah.
don't know, EMT basic is like the lowest level. Like not hating on them, no shade. EMT basic is the lowest level, and then EMT intermediate they don't do that anymore. But that was kind of like the mid ground between EMT basic and paramedic, right? And then there's paramedic, which is like kind of the closest thing to like what we would consider a nurse. And then are there different levels of paramedics or no? Not yeah.
I mean, other than like being an RSI medic, but that's like an extra, I guess, thing that you have to add on to your.
And there's like, there's different levels of like what you can do as far as like advanced life, like it's different levels of like advanced life support and basic life support, right? When it comes to, right? Like where paramedics can do certain things. And if you have a paramedic on there, you can do certain things, right? On the ambulance.
So paramedics can intubate and give like certain drugs. I'm a little rusty on that too, but intermediates can also give certain drugs, and I believe they can also do a certain amount of airway intervention if needed. But you can't, like, as a paramedic, I believe that you can give some sedatives, but as an intermediate, you can't.
Right. And
It's,
then
yeah.
EMTs are just like, we're doing
Yeah,
CPR
you
and
can't
we're
give,
loading and
you can't
going.
give,
Yeah.
yeah, no medications unless you have like an authorized medical control. So I would have to call and get like permission to give some type of medication if I were still working in the street.
Okay. And we're going to get into how you made the switch in a little bit, but why don't you tell us a little bit? Well, here, let's get into it now. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you went from EMT to 911 dispatch and all the things about that before we get into your role as a dispatcher? So tell us a little bit about yourself, Kendall.
So my name is Kendall, and so I started as an EMT or like taking the classes and stuff when I was about 16, and primarily on a volunteer basis. I did that and then eventually got my EMT. And I've been an EMT now for 12 years, about somewhere around that. Then I kind of dabbled in doing the firefighting. I got my firefighter one, firefighter two, all of my hazmat, evac, all that stuff. And then I started working in hospitals because the main goal was that I was gonna be a nurse. Everybody's goal at some point, I feel like, in life. And that ended up not really working out for me. And because I'm a terrible test taker and I just couldn't do it. Then I started working at like a medical transport company, transporting patients from hospital to home and stuff like that. And so in that transition, that's how I kind of became a 911 dispatcher. It was something that I was always interested in, but I just kind of never, I was always nervous about doing it. But my husband kind of not really pushed me, but encouraged me to apply for it. And because it was still kind of like public safety and still in the same realm, that's kind of how I got started doing that. But it interested me more so just because like I knew that it was something my dad talked about when I was younger, and how he loved being a firefighter, but he would always talk about his days being a 911 dispatcher and how much he loved it, and how he would be like the only person sitting in the room, and how it would just be crazy busy, and he's doing all these things, and that was just kind of his cup of tea there. So it interested me it was interesting to me in that way.
I remember Dad talking about being a
Okay.
911 dispatcher too. And for those that don't know, EVOC is the emergency, it's like the cutting people out of cars, which is a really fun class,
No,
right? Isn't EVOC the cutting?
driving,
Oh, it's the driving. What's the cutting people out of cars?
that just comes with the
Oh,
firefighting.
okay. That's a really fun thing to do, right? You get to destroy cars and cut people out. Or, well, you're not cutting people out of
Yeah,
cars, but you get to destroy cars.
yeah.
What was I going to ask you? Go ahead, Peggy. Or are you getting ready to say something?
Well, because like that's kind of what drew you into the field. So, what type of training do you have to have? Because like these are vastly different in what, going from EMT firefighter to dispatcher. So, like, what type of training does this really entail?
To be a dispatcher.
Hmm.
So going in, you need zero training. We teach you everything that you'll need to know. And that's kind of a misconception that people who are interested in it don't realize that you don't need anything. So, I had the prior experience with EMS and firefighting. I didn't really have any law enforcement experience. It was pretty easy. I mean, coming in and just the hiring process in general, it's a long process, but you don't need any training, but you need a lot of training once you're in it.
Takes a long time,
Okay,
right?
because like,
Yeah, it took me about a year, right around a year, to be completely released in my agency. Some agencies don't do that; they just kind of throw you to the wolves. But there is one singular requirement that you do need, which is a DCJS certification for dispatchers. in the state of Virginia. And so that's all you really need realistically in the state of Virginia to actually do the job.
Okay. How has like your understanding of the role changed since kind of like when you first began as like a little baby dispatcher to like now?
Yeah, I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I started. I thought like I knew what dispatchers did, but it was a very different picture once I started doing it. I don't really know how it's changed in the last 8 years, but it has. Can't think off the top of my head about that one.
It's fine. Is there, do you have to like kind of prepare yourself mentally for like this role, like for like a shift or something like that? Do you have to like mentally like toughen yourself up for that? Like, do you have to like shake it off or shake it, like what do you have to do to like get yourself ready for something like that?
I think it's gotten better over the years. The anxiety was always really high, kind of going to work. But I've been doing it for 8 years now, so it's not quite as anxiety driven anymore. But yeah, I would say you used to have to kind of try to like calm yourself down or find something or,
Hype yourself up.
get there early to kind of like get yourself ready and make sure you have everything you need. Okay, I've got water, I've got my, caffeine, I've got my Red Bull, like, you know, stuff like that. Get the feel of like what's going on in the room.
And for people who can't like for to visualize, right? Because I have stepped foot in like a dispatching center with her where she's at, and it is overwhelming, right? It is like screens everywhere, like phones ringing, like voices over radios. I don't know how anybody is like if you knew my sister and the way that she gets overwhelmed and overstimulated so easy, like the grocery store, the hair salon. Like she texted me the other day and she was like, I'm at the hair salon and the sounds in here are going to send me over the edge. The way that she could sit in that room and just like focus blows my mind. Because I walked in and I was like, oh my God. So
I
it's
f- I feel like being ADHD should just be a requirement to being a dispatcher because you kind of have to have it.
like when I'm at home and I have three screens that I'm working on, but it's quiet, right? Like, and nobody's bothering me and there's no phones ringing, and she's sitting at a desk with like multiple screens and all these things happening. I'm just like, how do you do that? Right. So it's like phenomenal people that are sitting there doing multiple things at once, but like you're not doing, and like that was the next question I was going to ask, or that we would like for people to know is like how you're supporting multiple roles at one time, right? Because you're not doing like law enforcement, fire, and EMS at the same time, right? So, can you explain to people who don't know how that works for dispatchers?
So it's kind of based on user agency. In my agency specifically, we have all of that kind of separate. So, you're assigned to a role and you work law enforcement for however many hours. And then we have like fire EMS, they're grouped together because that's how the department is. So you work fire EMS, and that's one position. And then we have an animal control position. And then we have a service position, which that's where we do like our warrants and protective orders. And then we have a service assist position. So they're like the breaker, and they are also there to help with the warrants and protective orders. And then we have a supervisor person or an officer in charge. And their role is to kind of like also give breaks if needed, but to kind of manage the chaos.
So you're just focused
So they
on
always got to be listening.
one thing, right? Like you're just doing law enforcement, you're just doing fire and EMS, taking those calls.
Essentially, yeah, or you're working that position. So everybody in the room answers the phone with the exception in my agency of the police dispatcher, because they need to be focused on our officers out on the road. But everybody in the room answers phone calls and processes them, and then they get routed to the dispatchers or they get routed through our CAD system.
You got a preference on which area you like to be in?
Not anymore. Police was my favorite because that was like the first one I started on. But now they're all pretty equivalent to me. It's just kind of like, oh, yeah, here I am today. But I do like to rotate through them and, so that it's like fair. I don't want to do too much of one thing. Like 12 hours of police is really tough. We work 12-hour shifts now, but 12 hours of another position doesn't feel like that much. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain, but police is always so busy, and I think you're always so like alert, like on high alert, waiting for something to happen that it makes it a little bit more, a little harder or more anxiety driven.
Okay, so actually being able to rotate through these different like areas kind of gives you that relief in some way.
Yeah, there's some agencies where you don't get to rotate through. Like your job is the police dispatcher, and that's what you work every day that you go to work. And I think that would drive me crazy.
That no, it sounds exhausting.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I feel like that would lead to like
Okay.
burnout really fast.
Yeah.
Is that something you've kind of ever experienced in doing this actually? Like that burnout or that compassion fatigue just because like you have to turn it continuously on.
Yeah, absolutely. All the time. Go through waves of higher burnout than other times. And sometimes it's difficult to get around that. I actually watch a TikToker who she has her job is being a 911 dispatcher, and she kind of like recently got in trouble for like talking about her job on TikTok. And so she's just going through like a tough time, and I like commented on it because she's kind of like a smaller creator and was just like, sometimes the burnout is just higher at times than other times, and sometimes you just have to like reignite your love for the job, and so you need to find out what that is. And she was like, you're right, I need to figure that out, and I think it'll help. So
So universally,
What has
what do you think is the love for the job? Like for dispatchers.
I think it varies for everybody. For me, I like to see the end result, which is hard because we don't get that a lot. There's only been a few times in my career of 8 years that I've ever seen an end result or like have gotten to know the end result. Generally, that is only because I've been recognized by a citizen who, contacts my agency and then says, oh, she did a fantastic job, or, we'd like to recognize her. So I've got like a personalized thank you card from this person, and, they sent pizza for like the whole shift while I was there. And, so that kind of, those things stick with me. Those are things that I really enjoy because I actually got to see that I made a difference for somebody, whether it be an emergency or not so much an emergency, because I've had both.
So having that like closure for you is, like, because that's, I feel like that's the, like the law enforcement and the EMS are on scene. You send them there, they get to see it, not quite from the beginning, but they get to see it from beginning to end. And you're on the
Yeah,
phone, right? And then as soon as they get there, you're done. And then you're kind of
yeah,
left there like, hopefully it ends well, right? Or maybe not.
right.
And the few times that
Yeah,
you've gotten closure are nice, but that's not usually the case. So I think, and like when Peggy and I were talking about it, and then like statistically speaking, dispatchers don't usually get the closure. So then you're moving on to the next call. So you have to like box it up, close it up, put it away, and move on, right? So compared to the times that you don't get closure and the ones that you do, like, what is the I'm what am I trying to say, Peggy? Like where's the line, right? For you on the the difference. Peggy, what's the word? We're doing it again.
I love you, but I'm not in there with you.
Words are hard. What's the word? Like, like what's like where do you draw the line and what's the difference for you, right? Like you get closure and you don't, right? Like how do you
You move on from
right,
it.
like how do
yeah.
you
How do
move
you move
on,
on
right?
from
Like how do
like
you gain closure
from
for the
not getting
times that you
closure?
don't get closure, right? Ugh.
You just don't. It depends on the situation. If it's like a fire department or law enforcement, sometimes we can just call them and ask them, hey, what happened? Or, if they come in later, we can, especially law enforcement, if they come in to bring us something or drop something off, then we can kind of ask them like, hey, what happened with blah, blah, blah. And they can kind of like tell us or give us a little bit of closure. But sometimes you just don't get it. I feel like that's more often with a lot of like medical or like fire
Mm.
type calls that you really don't get that closure. More so for like probably more medical related stuff, like somebody in cardiac arrest or, you know, they're unconscious or they've had a stroke or, you really just don't know what's going on. And you're kind of like, it kind of sticks with you because you're like, well, what happened? Are they, did they wake up for you? Did they wake up at the hospital? Are they going to wake up at all? And sometimes even the firefighters and EMS might not get that closure that they need either. If they take them to the hospital and it's kind of they drop them off, then they might not know what happened. So a lot of times we have like a form that if we're really curious, we can fill out this form and we have somebody that we send it to
Mm.
and they will get in contact with the fire department and the hospital to kind of be like, hey, can we get some closure on this and can you tell us what happened or and then they can kind of report back and let you know what happened.
Compartmentalize was the word I was looking for.
Oh yeah.
How do you
Yeah, but I mean
compartmentalize
sometimes
it?
you do have to compartmentalize it for, for a time. And sometimes that could be minutes to hours to days. So it
Mhm.
just kind of depends or you just compartmentalize it forever.
Yeah, just kind of pack it up and put it away.
Yeah. I do think that having a background in fire EMS helps a lot because when people call us for someone being in, like not breathing, they're, not conscious and not breathing, and we initiate CPR for cardiac arrest. I know that a lot of times out of hospital, it's, you know, a lot less likely that you're going to get that person
Yeah.
back. So I think that kind of gives me an advantage in a way because I know this and I try to explain it to like newer people coming in the door too that um the kind of like the statistics surrounding that and as you did what you could during the time that we had them. So
Right. Like being realistic about the outcome.
yeah.
So, there's like medical calls, you've got like law enforcement stuff where, things are happening with law enforcement. When it comes to like mental health calls, I'm sure you get those, right? I mean, what is I don't want to say what's the fallout, but what's the impact on you guys for mental health calls?
We get a lot of mental health calls. We have a lot of um, frequent flyers, I guess, if that's what you want to call them, or we kind of term them like chronic callers,
Mm.
where they obviously have some type of mental disorder and they call us every day, all day long. Sometimes they're nice to us, sometimes they're not nice to us. It can be frustrating having to deal with it over and over again, especially when you don't get, I guess, like the support from like law enforcement in those types of situations because they don't want to deal with it. And so then we're just kind of left to deal with it. Um, so it can be very frustrating. I have had other like mental health type calls where, somebody is obviously like asking for help with whatever they're dealing with at the time. And then, it gets sent over to law enforcement and then all of a sudden it's not an issue anymore. So sometimes I'm like, whoa, what happened from the time that I talked to them, from the time that law enforcement talked to them? What's going on here? I have this person told me in writing through a text message, like from a text to 911, that they were actively suicidal. And how all of a sudden is this just like, we're clear?
Right.
What? So,
I'm sure that's
yeah,
frustrating too, because then there's like
yeah,
the worry, and all of a sudden, like what? Where?
yeah,
Okay. Also, I didn't know that we could text 911. I'm kind of out of the loop there.
yeah. So, well, that's a big push or a big change that will be coming kind of to 911. So, kind of like going back to when you asked me about like some changes that are happening in 911. So, when I started, like they always talked about what's called next generation 911, and I'm like, what is that? What is that? Nobody knows what this is. Nobody can really explain it. But next generation 911 is basically like bringing text messaging and video calls and like more technology to the 911 center, which I actually just wrote a paper on it for school, but how it will be good for 911, but it can also be really bad too. So, people are sending me pictures, or we're not quite there yet. So, the ability to text 911 is there for most larger user agencies now,
Mhm.
but the pictures and videos will be coming at some point. But I mean, you can kind of think about how it would be, somebody's at some type of shooting or a big fight call or something like that, and they're live streaming the situation to us. Like, we already have to deal with so much, and then now there's gonna be the potential for that.
Yeah, it adds a whole other element to like the communication that like now people don't just call, right? Like now they're texting, so now you got
Yeah.
to have someone else to monitor that too, right?
To monitor like the text,
Yeah, or does
or
it just come through on your system there in front of you?
yeah, no, so it comes through our phone.
Okay,
So when you text 911, it actually, we have like a little thing that we click on, and it brings up a box, and you can see what they've wrote,
I see.
and you can type back to them through our phone.
I see. Yeah, that does add a whole new element of also like I want to FaceTime 911. Hi.
Yeah. I mean, so like that could be good for, for some things, but yeah, the big concern or the big worry is how it's going to affect the dispatchers in the long term too.
Right, because like if I'm in a potentially volatile situation or someone is like, you know, you've got people out there who want to live stream themselves committing suicide or doing
Mhm.
something very, potentially triggering, and they're like, "Oh, let me just call 911 and show them what I'm doing because you guys aren't vicariously traumatized enough. Let's go ahead and do that too to the 911 dispatcher." So, yeah, I could see where it could be helpful and also very difficult as well. So, that's I guess maybe they'll have to screen those calls out. I don't know. I'm sure they'll.
That's going to be rough because like they're getting already all of these little snippets of like some are mild, but it goes to the extreme to like you're handling trauma all
Mhm.
day and like you're having to hold space for these people and like y'all are the first call before someone else gets to them. So how do you is your mental health supported after that? Like, does someone help, like, especially if it's a very traumatic call, is someone there to, like, help you decompress? Is someone there to walk y'all through it? Or, like, hey, I just have to I do have to, like, just put it back in the compartment and move on?
Resources are available. The mental health thing has been a hot topic lately, or just within the past several years. We used to not really get the resources, or they weren't really available. They are available, but a lot of times you have to be frank about the help that you need, or like a peer or someone has to kind of like recognize that this person's not doing well. The people that I work with are pretty proactive in checking on you, or just kind of like monitoring you. Like especially my direct supervisor, like she's pretty good about stuff like that. And I can't remember what the situation was now, but a couple weeks ago, like I was like, man, this really threw me. Like it made me emotional after the fact. Oh, I remember what it was now.
I do too.
Um, it was a mental health
Yeah.
call actually, and it was a mother-daughter, and answered the phone, and I could hear another person on the phones, and I was trying to get like the address because that's like the first thing that we need to get is the address. And as I'm trying to get the phone number, I hear her say, "Put the knife down." And I was like, "What?" So I just put the call in immediately and was
Mhm.
like, "Someone on the call is asking someone else to put a knife down." And so the mother was having a mental health episode, and the daughter was there. And the other party that was like on somehow either on another phone or like a three-way call or something was the father of this individual, and he was headed there, but I didn't know if he could hear me. And so at this point I could hear that the basically the daughter just put the phone down, and she just went to her mom and was just like, pleading with her, like, don't do this, you don't want to do this, don't do this in front of me. And you know just saying some really personal things that she was really trying to like get her to be present with her in the moment. And I was like, I got really emotional. And I think, like I told Brittany, because a lot of times I will message her or talk to her about stuff. I think I called her, but I was like, it just made me so emotional because I was like proud of her, because I was like, I wish I could tell her that I was proud of her, because like it just, she just handled it so well. Like she didn't need me to do anything. Like I was helping by getting the help there. And so, like, I didn't even worry. Like, I had the address and I just documented what was happening in the call. I don't even know if she tried to, if she could hear me or anything. And I just kept documenting everything and sent help. But they ended up ECOing her and taking her to the hospital for assistance. But that call was, that's probably the last call that I've like gotten emotional on it. And a lot of calls don't do that to me that often, but I had to go take a breather after that one
Yeah, she messaged me and she's
for
like,
some
I had a
reason.
rough call, and she's telling me about it. And she's like, I don't know why this is bothering me so much. And so, and like, she's right. Like, she usually doesn't, message me that often and say that she struggled with it. And I'm not struggling to understand why she's like, I just didn't do anything. I don't understand why it
And
ended okay. Like law enforcement got there and, nobody was hurt. And I'm like, you did the thing, you did your job, and you held the space for her. And she's like, but I didn't. And I'm like, but you did. Like, you gave her the support she needed, like, during a difficult time. So I think that, like, a lot of people don't understand, like, yeah, you take the call, you do the thing, but, like, this is, like, when you call 911, like, you're not having a good time, right? Like, if you have to call 911, you are not having a good time. And those people are, like, holding space for you while you're on the phone until, like, other help arrives, because, like, dispatchers are like, stay on the phone with me, like, don't hang up, So I think that they don't give themselves enough credit a lot of the time to that they're like talking you through it, or keeping you calm during super difficult situations. Even though, that Kendall said, that girl put the phone down, had she picked it back up, or she knew that Kendall was going to stay on the phone until other help arrived, so had she picked it back up, she knew Kendall was going to be there, right, to help her through whatever was going to happen next. So, like, even though she was not giving herself enough credit, she did the thing. And I think that I don't know, might be, probably is universal among all dispatchers. So yeah, she struggled with it a little bit, but she did the thing. And even though she says that one was probably the worst one in a while, there are probably others that she's probably thinking about right now that she's like, oh, that one was rough. And then she moved on to the next, right? Because
yeah,
she won't tell you, but she's a
there
highly
was more
anxious
that
individual.
was way worse than
Yeah.
that. I've had more that are way worse than that, but for some reason that one just got me.
Yeah, I can think of a few that we've talked about that were way worse than that you moved through so much faster than that one, and that one ended well
Yeah.
compared to some of
I
the
don't
others.
like the filing cabinets that y'all all keep.
Yeah, but that's a first responder thing, right? Like,
Yep.
they just file it away, it's fine. And then,
Yeah.
like, they come into your office, Peggy, and they're like, I don't think I have PTSD, and I'm like, what?
I love it when they come in. They're like, I'm not
I'm
traumatized. I'm
fine.
like,
I'm fine.
sure.
Yeah, it's
You
fine.
only listen to it day in, day out, and you've just tucked it away.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what's it like once the barrier comes down and the filing cabinets just
Yeah.
all come undone.
And it's
Yeah.
worth.
I mean, I recommend therapy to everybody, especially in our line of work, because I didn't myself have a therapist until about 4 years ago. So,
I wonder why that was.
right.
She did that on her own. She did that on her own.
I did.
She did it.
I did.
And she saw
Good.
one that specialized
But
in first
a lot
responders.
of things, yeah,
Good.
she does, and does EMDR and stuff like that. And, I probably did about 6 months of EMDR, and, we went back to things in my childhood. Like it's crazy how much things in your childhood can affect you in your adult life now, today, right now.
And we are EMDR therapists. We were talking about that in our last episode, how like you got to go back. You got to go back all the way to the beginning to get through the stuff now that's happening.
Yeah.
That touchstone memory to, because the past always impacts the present. I remember when you were doing EMDR and you were like, I was processing stuff from here and there, and I was like, I know, right? Like I avoid that. I've been avoiding that too. My therapist is trying to get me
Yeah.
to do brain spotting. We're not going to talk about that, but I'm in avoidance. I'm in avoidance right now. But anyways, yeah, she started seeing a therapist that specializes in first responders. I think she's probably, other than us, I know there's one down the road from us. We're not going to talk about that one. But then there's Kendall's therapist. She's in Ashland. I think she's in Ashland. She's a psychologist, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's a psychologist. So I think there's only like three of us, three different practices in this area that do that. So, but you're not still, are you still seeing her, or kind of like off and on?
We're kind of in the spot of if you need me, call me.
Yeah. She
So,
kind of cut the cord. I
because
remember.
she, I would see her and she'd be like, "So what's going on?" And I'm like, "Nothing. Just, same things."
They had to
Like,
bump you
she's
to
like, "So what do you
everything.
need from me?" And I'm like, "Do not discharge me. I do
Security.
not want to be discharged from therapy." She's like, you can always call me if you need something. Just shoot me an email. And I'm like, I know, but like, I just,
Don't leave me.
because of my job, like, I just don't want to, like, I don't want to be discharged from
Yep.
therapy, like, it's scary to me now.
You gotta have that security blanket, you know.
Because yeah, there was a time where I got super anxious about something and I literally emailed her and she was like, okay, see me at 2 today, right now, like in a couple hours. And I was, I'm supposed to be at work. And I went to my supervisor and I was like, look, this happened. I'm really anxious about it. It's got me in like a spiral. And can I go see my therapist for 20, 30 minutes so we can just like talk it out? And she was like, yeah, cool. So I like was at work, did a quick like call on whatever platform they use for video. And I was like, okay, whew, I'm good now. But if I didn't have the connection, if the connection was not there, how do you bring yourself down from that? A lot of people don't know how, or don't know how to get through that. So
So what steps do you guys like? So earlier when Peggy asked about like supporting each other, is it like, you take a hard call and then like maybe your supervisor notices or another coworker notices that like maybe you're not well, and so they're like, Kendall, like, they know that you've taken a rough call or whatever. You need to go take a break, or like, how do you guys notice like that you're not well and you need to go take a break, or maybe you notice someone else? Is there like signs and symptoms that you guys see in each other, or just that they've taken a hard call? What does that look like?
I think it can be difficult, especially if it's someone that you maybe not really work with that often. I work with the same people every single day, all day long, for at least 7 hours of my shift. I'm, with the same people, and then a couple of people were on the exact same 12 to 12. I think you just kind of have to know them and their personality and you kind of learn what might affect them more than some other things. Like in my instance, I'm always really like, I'm not loud, but I'm pretty vocal about like just in general at work. And so, if I take a call and then all of a sudden I'm really quiet, well, they're probably going to be like, hey, what's going on? You good? But generally, a lot of people after, that you take a call, when you hang up, people are like, oh, you did good, or, blah, blah, blah. Or, they're kind of like there to immediately listen if you have something that you just want to like say. And then we have, we can kind of like, I want to say like ring the bell. It's not really ringing the bell, but, if we're worried about someone, we can reach out to like our management and say, hey, so and so took this call and it, was kind of a difficult call, and they've been pretty quiet for the last couple days and stuff like that, but for the most part we all support each other.
So you're able to like notice that like somebody's shutting down and like so and so might not be okay. Maybe we need to check on them. And you're actually trained in like peer support and SISM and stuff like that. Are you the only one there that's trained in that?
And peer support, yes. I don't have CISM. There's a couple of people in my agency that have, I guess, like CISM, but peer support has been like the bigger thing over the past couple of years. So I know like our law enforcement has been trying to get certified, like people certified in peer support. I believe our fire department has people in peer support, but we don't necessarily have a program at my agency,
Right. Yeah, I know.
but the resources are there
Right.
to get help if you need it.
Okay.
Yeah. And even without it, I mean, even without it, you guys can still lean on each other for help if you need it.
Yeah,
Yeah. And you're
yeah,
trained in your training, like as you're being onboarded about like the signs and symptoms of compassion fatigue and burnout. And like, I remember when you were going through your training, you were like, look at this. And I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, that's good. I'm glad they're teaching you that stuff, right?
yeah,
So, in line with that, on
yeah.
during,
Pretty much in every big like class that you take, there's a big portion on stress in general, and where they kind of cover like the burnout and the compassion fatigue and stuff like that.
do you feel like it's accurate now that you're like 8 years in? Also, I can't believe it's been 8 years, but do you feel like it's been pretty accurate compared to like what they taught you and what you've experienced in the last 8 years?
I mean, I guess because I hear it so much sometimes that it just kind of it gets put in one of these folders back here.
Because Peggy and I say all the time that grad school did not prepare us to be therapists. Like what they taught us in grad school and what we do now is like it doesn't compute. It doesn't compare. Everything we learned about being therapists, we
Yeah,
learned like we were fed through a fire hose, literally. So
yeah,
I feel like being a dispatcher might have been the same. Like you sat in a classroom and then they threw you to the wolves. So you're like, oh no.
yeah. I mean, we try to teach you as best as we can about the job, but yeah, the job in general of being a dispatcher from when you're training to actually doing it can be quite different. It's much more controlled, of course, in the training environment than when you go out to the floor. So that's why, like for us, it's such a long process of getting released and going through everything.
Okay, the hardest part I think for me would have to know like where to go in the crawl streets and like the maps. Give me a Jeep.
Yeah.
Give me a GPS. Okay, give me a GPS. I need a GPS. Is that true? You have to know all the
Yeah.
streets. No, I can't do it.
I mean, I don't have to know all of them, but like jurisdiction is a big thing, and knowing about your jurisdiction where you work at is a big thing, because if somebody's like, "Oh, I'm by the big tree at the road with the barn," you know,
Like,
like
sorry, can't
sometimes
help you.
that's all you kind of get. And you got to try and figure out where they are.
I
Um,
mean, is it realistic? They're like, just ping my phone.
in a sense, yes.
Okay.
Without being too technical, when you use your cell phone to dial, 911, it basically goes to a tower site. And then that tower site kind of like triangulates your location, and then that location comes to us. It's also based on your carrier too, if you didn't know that. So some carriers can provide a lot more accurate locations than other carriers. Um, and so if it makes it to that point where I can see your location, then yeah, I can kind of triangulate you pretty close. But if it doesn't, for whatever reason, make it to that where it starts to triangulate your position, then I can't see anything.
Ooh,
And all I've got is maybe a phone number and what tower site you're it hit. We do have other ways of mapping now. So something that's big called Rapid SOS or Rapid Deploy, where it's a free platform that they've given to user agencies to basically help with locations. And so it's something that I log into every day. And as soon as your phone dials, because it's more GPS based, like coordinate based on Rapid SOS, as soon as you dial 911, it pops over into this platform here, and I can click on it and it'll give me a location, and sometimes can actually be more accurate than what 911 or like the tower site provides.
That's wild. Because I feel like in the movies and they're like triangulating it, and it's like definitely very Hollywood.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it can be like that, but we're getting into like pinging a phone and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
that is not how it looks at all in
Futuristic.
real life.
Well, see,
Yeah.
I want to be because like it makes us twitchy when we see like ourselves represented in movies and TV shows. How twitchy does it make you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I can't watch the show 911. I don't even know who plays in it, but I cannot watch it. Makes me mad.
Did you see the movie with
Um,
Halle Berry where that girl dials 911 and she goes and finds her? Have you seen that?
yeah. I don't think I've seen it, but I've heard
How
about it, yeah.
cringy. Like it's very I'm not 911 and it was very cringy. I was like the girl calls
There have been
911, she
times
goes
where
and finds
I'm
her.
I'm ready to leave and go find people though, because
So the
you know,
feeling is real.
yes, yes, the feeling can be real for sure. Or somebody calls about a dog or something, and we're like, all right, we're gonna go find this dog. We'd
I
like to, but
100% believe that you would leave and be like, I'm going to find this dog right now. I
yeah,
feel like I feel like Kendall's love for animals supersedes everything.
yeah. Or when people call about like horses running loose, and I'm like, finders keepers. Can I
Say
go get
where.
this?
Say where right now. Where were they at to begin with? And what's the cross street? Because I'm going to be there right now.
Yeah.
When we
If you could,
go ahead.
if you could give a piece of advice for new dispatchers, like what would it be?
I don't know.
Like what would you tell
Take
younger
Yeah.
you?
If you could look back at younger you.
I don't It's not that I never took this job seriously, but I think a lot of people don't understand quite the impact or the gravity that this job can have. And so, new people coming in the door, I think it's just important for them to know that this job is serious, and this job is not just, answering the phone or doing, dispatching the police or dispatching the fire department. Like it is that to a sense, but it's so much more than that. And it's so much more like stuff that you just have to know to do it right. Like especially in my agency, there's certain ways that we have to do things. And I think another big piece is, especially if you're coming into this job, not just for a paycheck, which you shouldn't be. I mean, the paycheck is decent, but most people are coming to this job because they have an ultimate goal of helping people, and being that vital link between the citizens and our user agencies, um, and just take that seriously. And
Seriously, because it's not just like picking up the phone and dispatching people. Like lives are on the line sometimes. Like not just like the
yeah,
people on the other end, like your law enforcement, your
yeah,
firefighters, and getting the right information so you can dispatch the right people to the right place at the right and like in the right amount of time.
yeah.
Like it's not just a phone call.
And right. At my user agency, we have protocols that we use. So when people call, we're sending you help, but we're also helping you. So, if you call because you have a nosebleed, we have instructions to help you with your nosebleed until law enforcement gets there. If you're calling because somebody is not breathing and they're not conscious or they've overdosed, like we have instructions for CPR. We have instructions to give, to help you administer Narcan, EpiPens, like applying a tourniquet, all kinds of stuff. And so some user agencies don't have that, but so we have the capability of doing that, helping you administer medications like aspirin if you're having chest pain. And so when people are calling you, they're, what do I do? What do I do? And I feel like that's probably a tough situation for some people, especially as callers, when you're calling for help and all's you might be getting is you're getting help, by the dispatcher sending help, but you're not getting like any immediate help because there's no, protocols that can help you through that.
And there's not an easy answer for some of it too, because they're freaking out. And you're like, I need you to do this. I need you to do that. And they're like, but I need help right
Yeah.
now. And you're like, well, I can't teleport, right? Like, I need you to just follow my instructions, right?
Yeah.
And like, in light of all that, Peggy, was it the 5 or the DSM 5 or 5 TR? Was it the 5? That included the criteria for dispatchers to be diagnosed with PTSD, right?
I want to say it's
Yeah.
TR.
I'm not saying you have PTSD, Kendall. I'm just saying whether you.
A lot of them end up with acute
If
stress
Right.
disorder, not just PTSD, because you're constantly in the moment with
Right.
it.
Right.
If you would have asked my lovely sister about 3 or 4 years ago, she would have told you that dispatchers can't get PTSD because it wasn't in the
Well, and
DSM-5.
that's true, right? Because the DSM 5 TR included that criteria for you guys to be able to be diagnosed with it, right?
I could have told you from personal experience that
And you guys,
You
that
told
it
her to shut
happens.
up, right?
well, and like you
You
guys
told her to shut the
probably
hell
did
up.
have it, right? But like diagnostically speaking, you couldn't technically be diagnosed with
Yeah.
it until recently, right? And so they added that
Mhm.
in to the text revision that like you could, because police officers and dispatchers, EMS, and like people who worked like for the government who were traumatized repeatedly couldn't be diagnosed until recently, which I think, I don't want to say it's great because that sounds awful, but like it's good that now you can be diagnosed with it and get the help that you need, and like the diagnosis, which I know some people are going to say, well, that's awful because having PTSD diagnosis means that like you could lose your job, or hopefully we're moving away from that stigma because, I think that's crappy because it gives you the help that you need. But I'm not saying Kendall has PTSD. Whether she does or not is her business. But, and the incidences of PTSD are probably grossly underreported in the first responder community.
Mhm.
But, and the inclusion of it in the DSM 5 has given you guys the ability to be diagnosed with it. And I think that was important to mention on this podcast because we were talking about the effects on mental health of being the first line of defense for first responders, truly. Because we were at a wellness event and I was like, are you coming? She's like, I'm working, but you can come by and see us, the first responders. And that was the day I walked in and I was like, oh my God. So yeah, I don't. Peggy, did you pull statistics of first responders with PTSD or not, or dispatchers?
I know there was 24%. That's why we knew that was grossly underrepresented. It was like 24% were diagnosed with PTSD, but it was much more that were diagnosed with acute stress disorder because again, it was just the constant living in
Yeah.
it.
So they have it, and then it kind of goes away.
It's
3.5% of
not much research out there
yeah,
for dispatchers in general.
yeah, 3.5% of dispatchers reported symptoms severe enough to be classified as PTSD, which is 3.5. What? That's nothing. I'm gonna say that's nothing, but that's so small. I mean, I guess 3.5% of like the total population, that's pretty big, but also that to me is just like so underreported. People don't want to say that they have it. That's wild to me. 3.5%. That seems like such a small number, which tells me that
Well,
for.
because it's understanding that stigma or
Mhm.
the like I only answer phones and I'm only hearing about it. I'm not seeing it necessarily, so I shouldn't qualify for
Yeah.
this.
Or if I say I have PTSD, then, I'm not reliable anymore, which is what we hear with like firefighters and stuff. So I don't know what that means for dispatchers, but
I don't think it makes you any like different per se. Like, it I don't I guess it can to an extent change how you do the job, but as long as you're being treated, then I don't think it should
right. So it's not quite the same
change
for
how you do the job.
dispatchers as it is for other first responders, is what you're saying.
I guess. I mean, I don't know like if a firefighter is diagnosed with PTSD, like do they get taken off the street? I guess it just depends.
Yeah. No, I mean, not the ones that we've encountered, not in therapy. Firefighters are a treat in therapy because usually by the time they get to
Yeah.
us, they're forced to come to us and they don't want to be in there with us. So
I
they're
love them.
they're lovely. They're absolutely lovely. Law enforcement too, right? But we love them, but they're also like, we don't want to be here. I don't need to be here. I'm fine. I don't have trauma, right? And so I don't have a 911 dispatcher. Abby does, right? Abby has a 911 dispatcher. So we don't get a lot of 911 dispatchers. Not that they don't want to come or they don't think they need to come. I think they are very good at compartmentalizing, like you talked about before. And so they just file it all away. They've got like little filing cabinets back there until it kind of comes to a head, or they retire and then they're like, I'm ready. And then they spill it all out, right? So maybe,
Yeah.
but I think you've been very proactive in being in therapy. So you are better at doing that. And having EMDR, you have like your little containers and your calm, safe place and all those things to kind of help you stabilize when you need it. And you also have a therapist as a sister. So you kind of get,
Medication.
yeah, and praise. So that helps a lot too. So we've got all the advice and all the things. So is there anything else you feel like you want our listeners to know about being a 911 dispatcher before we finish out? Any more advice? Any more tools? Anything?
A loaded question, but
Parting words of
Parting
wisdom.
words of wisdom?
I guess if you have to utilize 911 services, location is the biggest thing to know. You know where you are, know about where you are at least, so that we can find you.
That's all we have time for today, everyone. We want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Holding the Line with Got Your Six, where we are just a bunch of therapists who talk about the shit nobody else wants to talk about. We hope you got something useful out of it, or at least made you feel seen. A special thanks to our guests for taking the time to join us and share their unique perspectives and life experiences. New episodes drop every other week on our YouTube channel, Holding the Line TY6. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram where we post more helpful info, dark humor, and more of the shit nobody else wants to talk about. In the words of someone wiser than us, go forth and do magical shit, everyone. And make sure you call on 4th of July to complain about fireworks. 911 dispatchers love that. So just make sure you call. Make sure you call and complain about the fireworks. I'm obviously kidding. Don't do that.
Because everybody knows what gunshots sound like on 4th of July.
Oh my goodness, she's gonna kill you later. I'm gonna love that for you, Brittany.
Make sure you call and complain about the fireworks because all dispatchers absolutely love that. We really, really do. No, don't do that. You tap the phone lines for real emergencies. Don't ever do that. Don't do that.
For that person that actually blew their hand off from setting off the firework, you know,
Yes. Sure.
that's who we want to talk to.
Right. Real medical emergencies, not that. Not people who are blaring music. Those are for the non-emergency line. Non-emergency
Yeah.
line. Call a non-emergency line of your police department. Not 911 is for emergencies only.
It does all come to the same place though.
Mm-hmm. Those are
So,
for the people working the
if
phones,
you,
right?
well, we all work the phone, so we all answer 911 and the non-emergency, but 911 come first. So, if it's truly like a firework thing and you didn't blow your hand off, then non-emergency sounds like a good line to
And you
call.
can find your non-emergency line number on the website for your local police department. You don't need to call 911 for that. I just had to throw that in there because I saw a meme that was like, that was talking about dispatchers love it when you call for fireworks on 4th of July and New Year's. And I was like, I gotta throw that in there at the end. She's going to give me the evil eye. So
She did it, not me.
yeah, I know. Because Peggy wouldn't know that, but I had to throw that in there because I knew she was going to be very ugly with me about that afterwards. So we want to thank Kendall for joining us and giving us an hour or more of her time tonight. to talk about her role as a dispatcher and being very vulnerable with us at times and sharing her stories too. So thank you, Kendall, for joining us for another
Thank you.
and having another episode. I want to thank our listeners for listening in. Please like, share, and subscribe for our fourth. I guess this is number four. We said it at the beginning, and I've already forgot. For our fourth episode,
4 or 5, whatever it
four,
is.
five, fourth, fifth episode of Holding the Line. This has been Behind the Yellow Line. And if you didn't know that the yellow line on the American flag of all the lines represents dispatchers. Don't ask me about the other ones because I don't know them all off the top of my head. But I do know that the yellow line is for dispatchers, red's firefighters, blue is police. Don't ask me about the rest because I have to look them up. So thank you for listening to Got Your Six Counseling, Holding the Line with Got Your Six Counseling. And we will see you guys on the next one, okay? When we were going to do that equine therapy thing, Kendall was like, do it for me. Do it for me. So, but we never actually did that. So I guess we need to follow up with her.
This is why she was like, tell me where your horse is. I'll go get it.
Yeah. Yeah. She used to ride horses and then she just ride horses all the time. So I think that'll be, I can only imagine like if somebody called and they were like, hey, we're going to do, or so, there's a horse that's missing or something. And Kendall's like, I'm going to go find that. Missing animals. How many missing animals or abandoned animals or animals on the side of the road have you brought home?
None, because my husband would kill me.
Lies. I remember those cats and those dogs that you brought home, those little puppies I saw pictures of on Facebook.
Oh, well, those were homeless, but were picked up by animal control. So it started with two cats. I did not keep them, but they needed
No.
to be bottle fed, and I have experience with that. And we knew mom was around. We just needed to catch her. So I took them for the night and bottle fed them and made them go to the bathroom and took
That
them
just
back to
sounds
work in the morning.
unfair. Like, why would he let you keep them?
Because he's
Yeah.
mean. He's
And
mean.
then
Sorry.
and then I think I named them, of course.
But if you name them,
Luma
you get to keep them.
Yes.
I named them Loomis and Knox
Loomis.
because it was just two, and they were just like complete opposite. And then I had a puppy one time, that was abandoned, or I don't know, but it was a teeny tiny little puppy, and it died on my chest, and that was traumatizing. But
Love it.
The worst. The worst. But weren't the little kittens that we had, like that you and mom had, weren't didn't they have to be bottle fed too?
hmm
Yeah.
yeah,
See, she has a history. I'm
yeah,
sensing a
they were.
pattern. Sensing a pattern. Yep.
Yep, had to bottle feed them and wake up every 2 3 hours in the middle of the night and feed them, make them go to the bathroom, go back to sleep. And I was in high school at that time, so
Absolutely not.
but I was in a veterinary tech thing at my high school program, and I would take them to school with me,
Nice.
and we would just like people would just hold them in class and like feed them and stuff like
See, I
that.
always
So,
thought you would end up being a veterinarian, so
well, that was the plan a long time ago, but you know.